If we can all rise. In this room, there are different views, different ways of expression, different emotional intensities, and different roads that lead to conclusions. May we combine clarity of mind with kindness of heart, and may we be impartial without bending to strong personalities. May we sacrifice the self-interest for the good of the whole. May we do our work with love and clarity of vision for the benefit of those that we represent. Thank you. So I'd like to call the meeting of Monday, November 28th, 19th to order. And I'd like to first of all acknowledge that we're on the unceded territory of the Cowichan people, and ask if there is an introduction of late items. Are there any late items? Ms. McWilliam, are there any late items? Oh, that's okay. Oh, from the mics.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are two late items for your consideration. One will be considered under closed, closing under Section 91C of the Community Charter, Labor Relations or Other Employee Relations. And the second late item is just an oversight on my part. I missed attaching some minutes, so they're now attached to the agenda there for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. So a motion to approve the introduction of late items. Second, okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And we also do have Councillor Bruce on the line on that little machine over there on his desk. Welcome, Councillor Bruce. Can you hear me okay? No? Maybe I'll just take a...
Gary, can you hear us?
Not really very well, but just let it go.
Okay.
I can't hear it well enough to really know what's going on.
Okay, let's make an adjustment.
Just one sec here. Okay, that's as loud as I can make it for you there.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Good. Well, we'll try and see. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So you can hear him too.
Okay, thank you for the technology adjustment. So an approval of agenda so that the November 19th, 2018 council agenda be approved as amended to include late items. I need a mover and a seconder. Second, okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Adoption of minutes from the November 5th, 2018 inaugural council, that the minutes of November 5th, 2018 inaugural council meeting be adopted as circulated. Is there a mover? Second, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And we have two delegations tonight, and I'd like to welcome our first delegation, Inspector Chris Bear, to come up to the mic. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, Mayor and Council there on taking over the reins as City of Duncan there. Look forward to working with you in the future, and this will be the RCMP report there for Mayor and Council for the months of July, August, and September. If there's any questions that you have, feel free to let me know about them. We'll go along like that, and like I said, if there's any other changes or anything else that you want to see, open to suggestions, or we can get into further detail there. So the annual performance plan kind of guides on how we do proactive work at the North Cowichan Duncan Detachment. Priorities are to build and maintain positive relations within the RCMP and our partners, police communication, police community relations, and the visibility of the police. Reduce crimes against persons, that's in regards to violence, domestic violence, and crimes against vulnerable persons. To reduce substance abuse, enhance road safety, build and maintain positive relations with the Aboriginal communities, reduce property crimes, and contribute to employee wellness. So for the statistics for the quarter, we had 6,236 calls for service, 5,536 were for the same quarter in 2017. So we're showing an increase of 9.6% in files here. So we've seen that we've had a busy summer again, and compared to last year, the stats just keep on going up. See that assaults, property crime, theft from motor vehicles are up from past quarters. And on July 19th, and we've had a couple other dates as well, where we've actually seen numerous tires being slashed in the Sherman Road area. So we have to keep that in mind when it comes to the statistics that come in for that, because one person going out and slashing a number of tires will actually, those one set of tires will be one occurrence. So if we get 20 tires slashed for 20 vehicles, that's 20 files in an occurrence. So that one person can make the stats jump up exponentially. Missing persons files, we've been working with the group homes there and trying to get the numbers from coming down, because missing persons files, we get a lot. We can compare them almost as high as Nanaimo's. Not as bad, but substantially. Through July, through August last year, we had 217 files. This year, same period, we're down to 199. So we're seeing a little bit of movement afoot with that, so that we're getting less files. And missing person files are probably the worst files for us, because we never know if they're going to be actually homicide, or else is it just an overdue youth from a group home. So they're difficult for us. 21% of our files came from the city of Duncan. I think that's Councillor Bruce.
Just hold on for 1 sec. Should we maybe just...
I'll just keep on going on.
Yeah.
So proactive time, we're doing the general duty study there with our frontline general duty officers, and it shows that our proactive time, the time that we're out on the roads, looking for crime, being out there visible, not responding to calls, is around 8% of our time. So we're looking to bump that up substantially, because it's not enough time there for our officers to go out there and make a difference in the community on their own. Police community relations. Foot patrols, we've done 619 foot patrols. We've done 35 bike patrols, 117 bar walks, 195 school zone patrols, and we're recording our patrols out in Chemainus as well, and we've done 211 for the quarter. So we're getting out there and trying to be as visible as we can, and urging our members to get out there. Reducing crimes against persons. We did 8 ICAT files, 24 Car 60 patrols, and we're educating our officers in regards to crimes against persons. With the Car 60 patrols, that's where we team up with a crisis response team nurse. Our goal was to do that 3 times a week, but we found that there wasn't enough work for us to be going out there and actually spending time. And so we've altered that program a little bit, where the crisis response team nurse is available to the RCMP 5 days a week now. So if we get an occurrence, we call them up on the cell phone and can quickly go out and pick them up and respond to the call for service. So it's a lot, we're trying to see that if it's a lot better utilized, as opposed to just driving around aimlessly and seeing the same person each and every day and checking up on them. So we're gauging that. They're still coming out 1 day a week with our officers and hitting, of course, all the areas in the Cowichan Valley. Reducing substance abuse, we're doing hotspot patrols, trying to increase drug projects and search warrants, and recruiting confidential informants from that. We've done 2,783 hotspot patrols in the quarter. We've done some significant drug files. In July, we did West Home Road, which was a counterfeit money investigation. In September, we did 1050 Trunk Road. We did a search warrant and executed that. Stolen property, cash, methamphetamine, and fentanyl were seized. We've been working with the City of Duncan by law enforcement and other agencies as well in helping out with that. In October, we did Alexander Street, possession for the purpose of trafficking fentanyl and cash seized. And in October 10th, we did a local motel unit and seized fentanyl there as well. We're also enhancing road safety, increasing distracted driving campaigns, working with Halt First Nation, increasing officer training. We did 5 traffic campaigns in the Halt First Nation. Just recently, I believe it was last week, we did a distracted driving campaign, and I think it was around 39 distracted driving tickets that we issued. So distracted driving there is still prevalent in the valley, and we're starting to try and address that to make things better. Build and maintain positive relations between the RCMP and First Nations. We're increasing the presence and participation with the Indigenous people in the valley there at community events, and increasing panhandling awareness and enforcement campaigns. So we did 11 panhandling campaigns and 31 First Nations events that were attended. Reducing property crime, we conducted 64 curfew checks, 44 street checks, and there were 2 restorative justice referrals. Again, restorative justice referrals were down again, but we're trying to make a difference out there and making more referrals for that program. There are 5 priority offenders identified for the quarter. Human resources, it's been a really busy summer for us, and we had a lot of vacancies in our manpower. We're starting to see that a lot of members are finally transferring in, so you'll probably see a lot of new faces around the valley here with police officers. A lot of them look pretty young. A lot of them are coming out of Regina, and this is their first posting here as well. So we're starting to see a lot more relief for our other members there, and so we're trying to bump up that proactive time as well. Prisoners. Prisoners are slightly up for 2018. We had the year-to-date, it's 1,374 prisoners, up from 1,293 prisoners from the year before. And we also did Coffee with a Cop November 14th at the Willow Street Cafe. We had a bunch of people come in there and tell us about policing in Chemainus and give us their points of views and input. And it went over really well. So we're planning on doing another one in Crofton, and then again here in Duncan in the new, and shifting it around a little bit more. So I don't know. I'll turn it back to Mayor and Council there if you got any questions for me or anything specific.
Thank you. Are there any questions from Council? No? No. Thanks very much for coming in today, and I look forward to working with you over the next 4 years. Thanks again, and we'll be in touch about sort of doing a bit of an orientation for everyone here on policing in the region, and I look forward to that as well. Thank you. And for our next delegation, we have all the way from Victoria, Michelle Kirby from Childcare, BC.
Thank you for having me. I have to the clicker. Okay, great. Forward and backwards. All right, I am Michelle Kirby. I'm the Manager of Partnerships and Engagement for Childcare, BC. And this is a new role for me. I've only been in the role for about 4 months. And that's because, as you may be aware, the provincial government is making a massive investment in childcare. And so we are growing very quickly and trying to keep up with that. So that's why I'm here tonight. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're gathered here on the traditional territories of the Cowichan tribes, and that their historic connections to these land continue to this day. So this is just a brief overview of what I'm going to talk about tonight. The vision, how we want to create some and sustain new childcare spaces, successful projects to give you some ideas of how you might spend some of the government's money and build childcare for the Cowichan Valley, and some examples of leading local governments. And you might be surprised to hear who those are. And then I'll have time for questions if you have any. So I'll begin by explaining that in February 2018, the provincial government announced in their budget that they are ready to invest $1 billion. I love saying that. It's a great number, especially for when it comes to childcare. I began as a childcare advocate about a decade ago, when my own kids were little, trying to find childcare was a real struggle, and also seeing women around me and families around me looking for childcare and struggling to find it or afford it or find quality care were real pressures on all kinds of young parents, and it's gotten only much worse since. So at that time, Lynelle Anderson, who is advising the government, she's an accountant, she's also a childcare advocate, came up with this number, $1 billion, that we would need $1 billion investment in order to build childcare for BC. To build a universal childcare system, to begin it, would take $1 billion investment. And to most of us, that seems like an enormous amount of money, but it's also only a small portion of the provincial budget, which is about $64 billion. So, you know, it's a substantial sum, and it's the first time we've made an investment like this, but it's just a drop in the bucket if you look at the bigger picture. So we've made this 10-year plan to start building towards universal childcare for BC. And the provincial budget contributed $1 billion, but we also have a federal contribution over 3 years of $153 million, which is a substantial sum that has never been done before as well from the federal government. So this is exciting. We're trying to make sure that we're investing in all areas, the 3 pillars of a universal system, which would be access, making sure that there's universal access, that if you need a space, you can get access. Affordability, making sure that it's not so expensive that you can't afford to access that childcare even if it's available, and making sure that it's high quality no matter what you're paying or how hard it is to access those spaces. We still want to make sure that the quality remains high. So as I mentioned, there's $1 billion, so we break that down into affordability. As you may have heard, there are several programs that have been rolled out over the last several months. Starting in April 1st, there was a $350 reduction called the Childcare Fee Reduction Initiative. So for families paying for infant toddler spaces, they had their fees reduced by $350 a month, which was a massive shift and a really welcome change for parents that were really drowning with the cost of fees. I like to use the example of a colleague who pays $2,200 a month for one child under 2. She had to wait 3 months after her maternity leave was up because she was on so many wait lists, she couldn't get a space anywhere. First space that came available was $2,200 a month in a corporate style daycare. So she took the spot because it was all that was offered, and she needed a job, right? You need to get back to work, and 3 months without income is really a stretch for people that are looking at challenges with housing costs and everything. So so that $350 has now dropped. Her fees down to just over $1,600, which is a really welcome change. And we also instituted a new program called the Affordable Childcare Benefit starting in September. And that replaced subsidy. As many of you may have heard of, subsidy was a form of reduced fees for parents with low income. So what we did, instead of continuing to offer subsidy at a higher rate, we've expanded subsidy to everyone under $111,000 income. So it used to be that if you were under $45,000, you would get subsidy, and that was only accessed by about 20,000 families in BC. Affordable childcare benefit is now offered to many more families, so we're up to about 80,000 families now, and we expect to be about 86,000 families by the end of next year will have signed up for the program. It's an online sign up. It's very easy to access. It's also, there's an online calculator that helps you determine how much your benefit is, because it's a range between $45,000 and $111,000 of family income. It changes and shifts depending on the age of your child and how much you're paying in fees, but it is generally a welcome reduction to most families, and there's some relief for those, especially in the lower end of the income threshold, where they can see their fees reduced dramatically. So, and I should also mention another little project that we've just been rolling out. We announced last week, you may have heard, the Universal Childcare prototype sites. There are 52 sites across BC that have been opened where we are testing funding models and testing the operational models of a universal childcare. So, which means free daycare for some. Anyone under $45,000 a year would have free daycare. And then there's a range of up to $200 a month for those earning up to $111,000 or beyond $111,000 as a family. So it's, again, dramatic reduction in fees for families. And we're taking these sites, we chose sites, there were more than 300 applicants from all over BC, every range of childcare you can imagine, from in-home family in-home family daycare to like the corporate big box style of daycare and everything in between. So we tried to choose a range of all those different styles of daycare and also tried to cover the geography of BC. So we have some sites in the north, some sites on the island, some sites on the little islands, just everywhere in between. We tried to kind of get a real understanding of what childcare is being offered and how it looks all across BC. And they will be reporting back to us monthly. We'll be able to get a good idea of where their profit margins are if they are for profit, and what quality looks like in different communities, and how much the threshold for parents, what that looks like in each community, because it's different depending on where you live, right? So we're really spending the next 18 months learning as much as possible from them, and at the same time hoping to build a larger system that we can roll out and scale up to the rest of BC. So it's very exciting and also incredibly daunting. The next aspect is quality. We're trying to invest in early childhood educators and make sure that they have access to education all across BC, so that there's 620 new spaces at public institutions across BC, so that if you are looking to get into childcare, you can access it. We also providing subsidy to make sure that, or bursaries, sorry, to make sure that it's not the fees that are stopping people from entering the early childhood educator sector, and or encouraging them to return and upgrade their skills. We've also given them a wage enhancement, so they're getting $1 an hour starting September 1st, 2018. $1 an hour raise, and then next year they'll get another $1 an hour raise. It's not enough. We recognize that. They're highly underpaid in the sector on average, and we're doing our best to raise those wages and attract people back to the sector. Accessibility. So this is my area. So we're trying to build the spaces. There's not enough spaces. There's about 18% on average spaces available per to population of children. So if your community had 100 children, there's only 18 spaces available. And that goes from 0 to 12, birth to 12. And we're trying to make sure that we have adequate spaces so that there's choices available to parents and families. Right now, there aren't choices. You get what you get. And if you get lucky, you find a space. So we'd like to offer choice, and that means bringing up the number of spaces available to about 50 to 60% to population. And that means we have to build. You guys need a capital investment in your community. So we have several programs. We've funneled some of the money from the federal government into UBCM, the Union of British Columbia Municipalities. As we see, they have had great success with the gas tax funds. Sending gas tax funds to local government has worked really well. So we have given them $13 million in space creation funding, so that's only available to local government, and it's focused primarily on the infant, toddler, and 3 to 5 range. So trying to get the really difficult spaces to build and the difficult spaces to find, the most expensive ones. That's why this money is available just for that sector. It's up to $1 million per application to create new spaces, and it's 100% funding. So you guys don't have to come up with anything. All of the project costs are covered by this $1 million if you can budget that. If you can budget a build as well as all the planning and everything else, the architectural fees and servicing of the site, that's all encapsulated in that up to $1 million. the hard part is that the application deadline is January 18th, 2019, which isn't very far away. So renovations are a little less time consuming to plan. Maybe that's your option, I'm not sure, but please consider this as something you could do for your community in the very short term. But mostly what I'm here to tell you about is the planning grant, which already we've had support. You already know that you've got support from the Cowichan Valley Regional District. You've also, I went to the municipality of North Cowichan where there was unanimous support to apply for this grant. And the thing about this grant is $25,000 per local government, and it's used to plan for childcare, to find out what kind of spaces does your community need and where do you need them. Do you need infant toddler spaces? Would they be best placed next to a community center, or would they be better, in a residential area? Is there a place or a space in your community that would be better served with before and after school care? It just depends on your population needs and what the demand is out there. So without that information, it's difficult to build, and it's important to plan things well. I have an example of a community where a childcare was built by a nonprofit agency with provincial funding without having planned it. Like, they didn't really think it through, and they weren't experienced childcare providers. And so they built a 3 to 5 daycare in the middle of a rodeo ground. And no one really wanted to drive there and have space for one child, but not their infant and toddler or their older children. So they really couldn't attract anybody. And that was in the community that the fastest growing population in BC. So it's not like there wasn't an abundance of need or desire for spaces. It just was a terrible location. So even when there's desperate need, sometimes the location wasn't welcoming. It was in the middle of a rodeo ground. It was a rundown building. It just didn't work. So creating spaces with some foresight is really important. So that's why I encourage you to partner with the CVRD and other neighboring municipalities and apply for this funding. It's also, the application deadline is January 18th, 2019. But if you collaborate with your partners, you can not just get $25,000, you get $25,000 per local government. So that could be saved that if the CVRD, City of Duncan, and the municipality of North Cowichan all partner together, that's $75,000 that you can hire a consultant and have them do that planning. So it makes lots of sense. And then there's my project, which is not my project, but it's the program that I represent as the Partnerships and Engagement Manager, which is the Childcare BC funding, New Spaces Fund. So this is also 100% provincial funding, up to $1 million for local governments who partner with a nonprofit childcare provider. So we're looking for you to partner with somebody that has some experience in childcare and understands how to provide quality programming. But it's also an investment in a public institution or a public space. We don't want to pour our public dollars into something that is a private for-profit operation. We'd like to see that poured into something that we know can withstand the test of time and will remain operating for up to 15 years at the minimum. So that's why we're looking to public partners right now. So, and also the nonprofit sector tends to have a higher quality of programming, so that's why we're asking for nonprofit partners. There's no deadline. So if you can't get your ducks in a row for this January 18th, 2019 deadline, or grant, we will happily accept your application over at the New Spaces Fund. And I'm just going to quickly give you a couple of examples. This is Blueberry Creek, where they took an old school and they turned it into a childcare hub. This is a nonprofit agency, the Blueberry Creek Community School Society. We gave them $110,000, and they partnered also with the Columbia Basin Trust, which is another agency that gave them $30,000, and between the two grants, they managed to renovate one of the classrooms in this old school and replace the roof of the building, and now have 12 infant toddler spaces. But the beauty of this project is that it's a childcare hub, so there is everything from infant toddler to 3 to 5 daycare, a preschool and out-of-school care, youth programs for at-risk youth, and a Strong Start program. And it's all in the same building. So families are able to go there and drop off all their kids in that age range or pick up all in the same spot. And it creates a nice, convenient place for families, but it also creates a community hub. And it's a beautiful model. And this particular project went from 3 years of losing money without that infant toddler space to maintaining a healthy budget once they added those infant toddler spaces. So it sort of explains the need for the hub idea. Having more than one age range is really important. I also want to just highlight the fact that the Mayor of Castlegar supported the application by writing a letter of support, and they also gave some funding and provide an adjacent building for $1 a year lease to allow them to have extra space for out-of-school care. Port Alberni, they've got this beautiful brand new friendship center. The Uukwasuk is the Treasure Our Young Ones Childcare Center. It's also a language nest for the children to learn the new child language, and also for early childhood educators from the North Island College to practice their language skills. So they are learning language, the new child language at college, as well as the early childhood skills, and they can combine the two by working in this center, which I think is really cool. And Port Alberni donated to and rezoned, which we know was a process and a half to have rezoning done, but they did all that for the Friendship Center. So they gave them 2 vacant lots and the rezoning as an in-kind donation. So that's another way that local government can contribute, is by providing that kind of support when we know that it's a really huge burden for nonprofit societies especially, and those that are involved in childcare might not have that experience of how do I begin a rezoning application, how do I manage any of this. So that's another way you can help. So, for example, of local government that are already in childcare, this is the District of Oak Bay, where I'm from, and was a counselor for 7 years up until about a month ago, which is really kind of fun. Here's my Monday nights. I thought I had them free, and no, I love it. I can't get enough, obviously. So this is our high school, which was rebuilt in 2015. After about 3 years of redesigning and workshopping and design charrettes and community involvement, we managed to get this beautiful high school that was in the works for 30 years. We were finally deemed the highest seismic risk in the province, so they gave us some funding to replace it. And we lobbied as a community to get the additional funding for a neighborhood learning center. So that's was an additional package of $17 million to build onto our high school for community space. And we made really sure that that space included childcare. So we had a really old, decrepit change room in the middle of a park that was where we had a childcare center that had been there for 25 years. And the roof was leaking, and it was just a pretty lame little room out of cinder blocks, and it was really nice to have them move into right at the bottom of the photo there where the bricks are. That's the childcare center, and it's a 3 to 5 daycare with 25 spaces. It's got a long-standing staff because they are CUPE paid. They are CUPE members. They have decent wages. They have the lowest fees. They offer it's full-time care for $878, which is pretty low and very reasonable. And they also are able to access our rec center. And if you have childcare right next to a rec center, then the kids can go back and forth, use the skating rink and the swimming pool, and learn, do swim lessons. And that goes as well for the 178 out-of-school care spaces that are the rest of the length of the building there. They are there are a bunch of multipurpose rooms and a teen center. And those kids are also able to access all those programming options at the rec center, and that raises our attendance at the rec center and makes sure that it's a very nice symbiotic relationship. The childcare fees pay the $90,000 annual lease to the school district and also cover about $200,000 of the operating budget of the rec center. So that's a huge contribution to making sure that we can continue to operate and offer quality programming for all the kids in the region. Because it's not just Oak Bay, it's neighboring communities of Victoria and Saanich that access these programs. So it's a really huge benefit to the Oak Bay community because their rec center and this neighborhood learning center is supported by that, about almost $300,000 surplus. Whoops, wrong direction. And the District of Tofino is also a local government that sought to be the licensee of the daycare, and they have a small daycare that's joining their health unit, and it supports many families, and there's 18 full-time childcare spaces, but that's about supports about 26, I think, families in that community because there's part-time spaces in that involved, and it's working really well and has been supported by the city of, or the District of Tofino, in that they had to kind of take up the reins because the nonprofit agency that was running it, they just ran out of steam. It was a bunch of parents, and they've been running it for a long, long time, and finally just couldn't sustain that anymore, so the district took on that role and became the licensee, and it has now got their employees are directly connected to the district. So it really helped kind of make sure that this is a sustainable long-term program that isn't going to disappear at the drop of a hat, because as you're well aware, it's a small community and they have trouble keeping employees there because of the cost of living. So to have some extra support with some secure childcare spaces really makes sense for their economy. And finally, the CVRD is also one of the three. I failed to mention that there are only 3 local governments in BC that offered that are the direct licensee of childcare that employ the childcare providers themselves, and the CVRD is one of them. So this is the Shawnigan Lake Community Center, which you may be aware of, and it's an old school that was taken over by the community and offers childcare spaces. There's a 3 to 5 daycare, which has 8 spaces and could have more. And there's 16 preschool spaces with 2 full classes serving 32 families, 78 out-of-school care spaces, and it's been going for 23 years and doesn't look like it's going anywhere. So we'd like to see you renovate this and add more spaces, but that's up to your CVRD to make those choices, I guess. But that's a great operation, and it really supports the community with some solid, quality, affordable childcare, and we're pleased to see that kind of leadership from the CVRD. And that's that. So I'm happy to take any questions. I'm also happy to give you money, so please make an application for our $1 million of funds.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? No? And just to let everyone know too that Michelle Kirby did come and do a presentation to where all the local childcare providers were invited, as well as local governments, and that's where the motion that's in front of us that I'll read in a moment came from as well. So we just weren't able to get her here before the election to have this discussion, but the childcare providers were very supportive of this going forward as well from that meeting. And so the motion is that council support partnering with the Cowichan Valley Regional District to submit an application to the UBCM Community Child Care Planning Program to undertake a child care needs assessment within the Cowichan region. Do I have someone to move and second that? Okay, and does staff want to add anything about this at this time? No? Okay, all right, any discussion on the motion? No, hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And thank you very much for coming up here.
No problem.
And it's good to see you.
Happy to do it. Yeah, you too. This is wonderful, and congratulations to all of you on your election.
Thank you.
And good luck. And like I said, don't be afraid to ask for some money once that child care planning grant is done, you'll have a better idea what you need. But keep in mind those kinds of projects, and it's an ongoing deadline, so we're happy to receive your application at any time.
And good luck with your new career. Sad that you didn't run again, but understand why. This is great, and you're the right person to be doing it. So thank you, and thanks for coming up here.
And I forgot to mention, you are the host city to one of the universal childcare sites, as you may be aware. So Parkside Childcare is one of, is it North Cowichan? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sure the address said Duncan.
The address does say Duncan. Yeah, it's great. Thank you. Okay, so next we have a report of the Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just cover a few of the items on my report, which you have in front of you. The Trans-Canada Highway Boulevards, staff will be providing a draft design to the November 30th budget meeting for information, and will also be providing that same design to the city businesses and property owners on the Trans-Canada Highway between the Silver Bridge and Trunk Road. There was an open house that was held last month, but we want to follow it up with the actual details, make sure everybody has it in their hands. The Seine Road Water Project, the major construction of the city water main, is expected to be complete by the end of this week and then undergo testing in the upcoming weeks before that water main can be put into service. The Cairnsmore Neighbourhood Plan and Macadam Park Plan, Phase 2 of those consultations began last week with an open house for the Cairnsmore area, or open houses I should say, and the Macadam Park open houses are scheduled for Tuesday, November 27th from 8 to 11 a.m. by the concession stand, and on that same date, November 27th, next Tuesday I believe it is, between 4:30 and 8 p.m., and that portion is at the Trout Hatchery at the end of Warncliffe. Feedback on the proposed plans is also accepted on PlaySpeak, and the next reports to council are expected early in the new year. Summarize the feedback received. One correction to my report is the advisory design panel won't be meeting on the 26th. We're still putting together all the information for them to consider the form and character of the development permit application for 262 E.J. Hughes Place to ensure its conformance with the development permit guidelines. And lastly, just to touch on that, staff have scheduled a presentation to council from BC Housing in January to discuss possible grant options relating to housing opportunities.
Thank you. And I'll move to reports of committees. So these are carried forward from last council. Is that correct, some of them? First one. So Totem Expertise Thank You Letter, 7.1, that council directs staff to send a letter to John Livingston, thanking him for sharing all his expertise and providing assistance over the years on the city's totem collection. Do you have a mover for that motion? Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, that's carried. 7.1.2, the Totem Tour Book, that council directs staff to update the city's Totem Tour Book and complete a print run prior to 2019 tourist season. Okay, second. All right, any discussion? All those in favor? Okay. And 8, reports of staff. So retail sales of cannabis and cannabis-related products. The council established as a guiding principles that retail sales of cannabis and cannabis-related products not be located within 400 meters of any other location where the retail sale of cannabis and cannabis-related products has been authorized by the city or an adjacent jurisdiction. B, 300 meters of any school. C, 300 meters of any group daycare. D, 150 meters of Centennial Park, Macadam Park, Rotary Park, Charles Hoey Park, and any adjacent municipal or regional park. And E, 50 meters of any land-zoned LDR, low-density residential zones. And that council directs staff to issue a request for proposals for temporary use permit applications to authorize the retail sales of cannabis and cannabis-related products to run from January 1st, 2019 to February 1st, 2019, substantially in the form attached to the November 19th, 2018 report of the manager of planning. Do I have someone to move the motion? So that we can discuss it second, okay? And there's going to be a presentation. Yeah, okay.
Testing.
Danica,
Okay.
please, thank you.
Your worship, members of council, thank you. I just thought we could go over this together with a little PowerPoint just to make sure everyone is clear on sort of where things are. It's coming. Okay, don't mind my cover page, I couldn't resist. Anyhow, so you likely are aware that we've had recent changes, obviously, to federal and provincial legislation with regard to non-medicinal use of cannabis. And, sorry, again, I couldn't resist. In council, then, at this point, we've had a fair bit of inquiry from the public wondering how we intend to move forward. And so this is sort of our opening opportunity to consider the new council's position on the retail sale of cannabis and whether we allow the retail sale or not. So changes to federal and provincial legislation, and then where do we stand here? So one of the ideas that came to staff, to Peter in particular at the UBCM, was he met with a number of different city managers and different local government people, and a solution for perhaps moving forward was this temporary use permit process. And so we have been exploring it and feel that the process would be an appropriate and conservative tool should council wish to move forward with the retail sale of cannabis. And so this report is kind of going into that with a way forward. So the idea would be that we would put out a request for proposal as an approach for selecting businesses that might receive a temporary use permit. So the process would be based on similar approaches that were taken by more recently Cumberland and Langford are two examples. So that's island situations where they're a little bit further along than we are at this point. They've got a number of applicants to respond to the request for proposal, and then they set up criteria based on whatever our values are as a community and what we perhaps would like to see put in place, and they choose the proponents based on that. So just a little history on the situation. Obviously, the Federal Cannabis Act came into place on October 17th. And basically the provinces and territories are responsible for determining how cannabis is distributed and sold within their jurisdictions. So including rules on how it's sold, the locations, how the locations are licensed, how the retail stores must be operated, and the provinces and territories also have the flexibility to set additional restrictions, including lowering possession limits, increasing the minimum age, restricting where cannabis may be used in the public, and adding requirements for personal cultivation. The Act itself provides a strict framework for controlling the production, distribution, sale, and possession in Canada, with two main goals: to prevent youth from accessing cannabis and to displace the illegal cannabis market. So to date, the province has made the following regulatory decisions. I won't read them all, they're in your report, but I think there are a couple that affect us as local government predominantly, and that local governments will be able to set additional restrictions regarding both the retail and use of cannabis. And so this takes us to looking at the retail sales analysis. So the prospective retailers in Duncan have been calling us wondering what's going on. I had someone very upset the other day. They called me because they had a prescription and they didn't know how they could fill it. And so I was like, I don't know. We don't allow it anywhere in town. So, you know, what's our next step in this? And I think they had come up actually from the States and with a prescription, and we couldn't fulfill it for them. So anyway, they've been making applications to the province. And so then the secondary step from doing that is then the requirement is that the applicants, after they made application to the province, must concurrently have local government approval with respect to zoning and other matters that are valued by the local community. So that's where the things come to us. We have to decide if we're going to permit or not, because we're the ones that control the zoning. So presently the City of Duncan zoning bylaw prohibits marijuana operations in all of our zones. And so if we choose to permit the sale of cannabis within the city, as we said, we would like to consider each retail store on a case-by-case basis going through this temporary use permitting process. So the temporary use permit process would allow council to maintain some control over the time frame. It would limit potentially the number of outlets in the community. It may not. This is all conversation, but this is just sort of us coming forward with sort of a neutral perspective. But we could limit the number of outlets within the community. We could allow for a pilot period that would be renewable under the Local Government Act once after 3 years. So they would perhaps be granted the temporary use permit for 3 years. The Act allows them to do it one more time. And that effectively buys the city 6 years to pilot the situation. And then at which point maybe we've learned some things, and then we would officially change the zoning or whatever we would want to do at that point. Additionally, we can impose conditions to mitigate the negative impacts before and throughout the life of the permit. So it gives us some flexibility there to make up for things if we've missed out on asking for certain things. And it also provides an opportunity for community feedback. Through the temporary use permitting process, there is public hearings that are held, and that gives us a really good idea where the community stands on a certain issue and how we might address that. So the location guidelines in this case would allow the retail sale of cannabis and establish the following geographic guiding principles. And so what it does is, again, it helps us to conservatively monitor the impacts associated with this new use. And so based on some conversations that we've had with people from like VHA from the province, for instance, and other jurisdictions in the valley, these are some of the things that people have come forward, not just the valley, but across the island. These are some of the main locational guidelines that are coming forward from a zoning perspective. So locating 400 meters from any other location that has this cannabis retail use permitted. We would have a 300 meter limitation from each school, 300 meters from any group daycare, 150 meters from any park, really. So Centennial, Macadam, Rotary, Charles Huey, or adjacent municipal or regional park, and then 50 meters from any land zoned low density residential. Again, these are all open for discussion. They're just a starting point, so we would love your feedback. So just to give you an idea of what that looks like, the blue circle would be the 400 meters, 300 is more or less the green, and then 150 would be the yellow. So, you know, depending on what locations people had in mind, that would then, you know, determine where the next ones would be. So it's a bit of a game, trying to figure out who has the first locations and working away from that, especially when it comes to a 400 meter radius from being one from the other. So the application process, again, can be as complex or as simple as we would choose, but an example would be that we provide, that the applicants are required to provide some information on their current business understandings, the description of the enforcement undertakings that we feel would be important for them to have a handle on before coming forward. That they would have a business plan included in this that would then include things like their hours of operations, how they would address health and safety, what kinds of public education they may be willing to include. Here, there's a number of more details that I'm sure you can read about, but there's a lot of information like addressing nuisance issues, addressing impairment issues, again, providing educational initiatives and materials associated with the above and impacts related to social concerns. So there's a number of things that we could roll into this if we chose to go down this route. An ability for the proponent to get bonding and insurance, an understanding of where they would propose to be located, and the details if they have any legal or enforceable commitments that need to be upheld, we would need to know about. potential form and character, what's sort of the feel of it that they're looking for. Is it medicinal or is it more of a recreational approach? These are the kinds of things that we may want to look at. And then finally, a time frame for starting the sale of cannabis. How soon can they hit the market if we open the doors? So then here we are back to you guys. We're council. We would ask you to further regulate, if necessary, additional issues throughout the temporary use permit. And if this were to go forward, because we have the Cumberland and the Langford examples sort of moving forward ahead of us, it's pretty straightforward for us to go through with this, and we could probably have something out in the open starting January 1st if we wanted to, and then put the tender out and see what came back for the month of January through February, and then decide from there who the best proponents might be. And in your packages, you also have an unattached RFP sample in there that is obviously somewhat editable as well. I couldn't resist this one to finish on. It's clean.
All right, thank you. Does council have questions at this time? Councillor Capps?
I have one question. When it talks about 400 meters from other businesses selling cannabis or cannabis-related products, would that include just businesses going forward that are actually selling cannabis products, or existing businesses? I know we have a few that sell, you could say it's cannabis-related products, but they're obviously not selling cannabis itself at this point. Would that be included, or a separate matter entirely?
That would likely be a separate matter because we have them in place already, and we have a number of them in town.
So I was thinking that really shrinks the area. So
yeah,
that
it's
helps
the retail use piece that is the new one, and so it's a bigger one.
Awesome, thank you.
Oops. Anyone else have any questions right now? I have a question. Is there been discussion with North Cowichan and Cowichan tribes around this as well in terms of the location? So because 400 meters, right, if we had that, and right on our border there's another one, and there's different, how does that work?
So I met, we had a roundtable discussion with North Cowichan, Cowichan tribes, Malahat First Nation, CVRD. We're about 10 of us at a table about 2 weeks ago, and we all presented. Ladysmith was there too. There was like a whole good turnout of the local governments to sort of talk about that, to see what each of our positions so far, not all of us having come forward to council to get formal recommendations, but to sort of evaluate where we all are and what would be a logical path for trying to move somewhat together forward. And everyone had a little bit of a different position. So Cowichan tribes and Ladysmith, for instance, they've done a fair bit of consultation with their communities. They have like thorough surveys and questionnaires that have gone out, so they've got feedback from their public that has sort of verified some of their concerns or not. And that, I think, was very helpful. The CVRD has gone straight to, they've had a rezoning process, and they had a public hearing where a whole bunch of really interesting information came forward that probably provided them with sufficient, like a good understanding of what their local concerns were as well. So again, they're all somewhat moving forward in different directions. Basically, I'm just not sure at this point if I can speak about any more detail about what each of them is doing, so I'm just going to sort of try and keep it at that. Mm-hmm. But our feeling, North Cowichan, and we are, from what I understand, on a similar page to going forward with this temporary use process because of the flexibility that is available through that. And if it's not working, we can shut things down more, or we can alter requirements, but then also it's not opening the door too fast to have a flood in the market. And so they are looking at, again, similar distancing issues. Who goes first? I don't know, and that's the thing. And if we don't all have to have 400 meters, you could have 200 meters. The province makes similar recommendations to what we've provided here. So yeah, it's a good conversation to have, and we really wanted to put that to you as well to hear what, your feedback may be on it. Looking at that map that I created with the circles, depending on where the first one would be permitted, or the first two for that matter, that could really affect the whole layout of the town. And when you look at where the schools are, that changes where things are located as well, and it really does shrink the location possibilities down. So hopefully that helps.
So just so that I'm clear, so if, let's say that there was one kind of open on the border of Duncan and North Cowichan, just as an example, would it still be 400 meters then away from that, regardless of whether or not it crosses jurisdiction?
Ideally, but at this point we don't have an agreement with North Cowichan and anything in writing saying that, well, we want to put ours there and you want to put yours there. I don't know how we would deal with that. So we could potentially, if we wanted to create that agreement.
Because that's come up in different safety conversations around some of the existing businesses that are too close together because of that boundary, and creating kind of hubs of activity where we're trying to spread them out. So that would be one thing that I would want to see moving forward, is that an agreement like that. And I guess, is there any other questions before I ask another question? Just no? Okay, just, because I guess the other, I guess, concern with the asking for requests for proposals at this stage is that listening to what you were saying about Ladysmith and Cowichan tribes going out to the community first to kind of get feedback, are we putting people through a huge process that they have to go through to put in an RFP and then making them go through a process? Would it be better to do it the other way around?
Well, and this is completely up to council. That could be a recommendation. I think one of the things Ladysmith, I could be standing, I may need correction, but I think they're only having sale in industrial land areas, not in like the downtown area. So it's just a different feedback that came from the community, right? Because that might change the way the downtown area feels. But maybe not. Another thing was, do you only have one location? And my feeling is maybe tribes may be going that way, where they just have the one for the time being, and maybe down the road they may be looking at a different option. So, yeah, there's there's a whole, range of options here.
Just wondering if has there been any feedback gathering of any kind in regards to cannabis sales in the city of Duncan? Any sort of consultation yet?
No.
And then I'm wondering if this sort of, as you mentioned, like having lots of calls and people kind of wanting to know what's going on and wanting access to these things. With the TUP, am I correct in thinking that there would be a public hearing required for each permit? So that does seem like a way to, I'm glad to hear that there will be at least that public oversight. Thank you.
And that's also based on each location, right? So that's the nice thing. It's more site specific as opposed to trying to create these general what if, questioning.
Okay. Is there any further questions, or is there anything from staff that you want to add at this time from staff here?
I just wanted to mention as well, when we get to the licensing stage, if council does choose to go through the temporary use permit process, there is an opportunity for public feedback at that point too. It would be similar to when a liquor license comes to council.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess what I'm more considering is just that that's a huge application for someone to put together to then have to go through that process, whereas if we were going through that process first to sort of determine what the community feels would be acceptable, then it's not all, I don't know how many applicants there would be putting out an RFP, but going through that process and then sort of one at a time going through it. So it's sort of a chicken and egg thing, I guess, but that's where I'm struggling right now, is I'm not sure if that's a better way to go than this is.
Excuse me, Your Worship. Mainly staff's approach at this has been that predominantly, if you look at the material that's come out from the province or any of the other municipalities that have put out their regulations so far, they're all in the same ballpark around whether it's 400 or 500 or whether it's next to low density residential, those sorts of pieces. They're all pretty close with some small changes here and there. So we didn't really feel that a large public input period was really going to change much of that. And most of the inquiries we're getting are not from people actually looking to purchase, it's actually from the companies that are looking to set up. So what we're trying to do is set up that framework, similar to how a couple of the other ones in particular have set it up, to create that process, because without it, there's a lot of unknown right now. The other thing I wanted to just touch on is that the way that the wording is that those are guiding principles. That's how Langford and the others have put that material together. It's not that it's a set zoning restriction. So when the time comes and the feedback is coming from the community that says that we're off base one way or the other around the distances, that can be taken that feedback into account when council considers them. So I think there's enough opportunities for that dialogue through, because oftentimes it's going to be hard to really evaluate the impacts until you can see one in actual material form in front of you. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of theoretical, and as this is not until January into February, we're going to have seen a lot of these other ones, whether it's Langford or Cumberland or some of the others that are a little bit ahead of us in actually issuing them, see what's coming out of those applications and what those final details are. So and if North Cowichan and others do go ahead with some public consultation pieces, then we're going to learn from those as well. So I don't know that there's going to be a big benefit in waiting, other than we're just going to be waiting to actually set up some shops within the area.
All right, any further discussion from council? Hearing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, so we'll move to the next item on the agenda. Local election results. That council received the 2018 local government election results report from the Chief Election Officer, Paige McWilliam, dated November 19th, 2018, which includes an account of ballots for information only. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Conference policy exemption, that Councillor Tom Duncan be permitted to attend the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities Conference and the Union of British Columbia Municipalities Conference in 2019. Could I ask someone to move and second the motion? Okay. And does anyone on staff just want to sort of explain why this is on here? Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Your Worship. Council has a policy on council member attendance that usually in regular years, or not first years, would enable 3 council members to attend the AVICC, the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities Conference, and 3 council members to go to UBCM. It also has a provision in the policy that allows new council members in the year that they first get elected to also attend all of those conferences. In addition, the mayor would go to both of those conferences as well. So when we looked at the numbers, we realized that it would be actually all of council and the mayor, excluding only Tom Duncan at both of those conferences. So we thought it would be most appropriate if council so chooses to provide an exemption for Tom this year, and that way everybody will be going to both.
Any questions from council? No. Okay, hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Vancouver Island Library Board appointments. That Councillor Tom Duncan be appointed. Actually, I guess, how did we do this if we have to appoint someone? Just move the motion blank and fill it in and then do it? Okay. And that Councillor blank be appointed as the alternate to the Vancouver Island Library Regional Board from January 1st to December 31st, 2019. So if I get someone to move this, and then we can talk about who will fill in the blank. Second. Okay. So I think it's a two-year appointment. Is that right? Or he said this is his last year of being able to be on it. Can you explain that a bit?
Yes, it is actually a 1-year appointment, but they have a limit on how long people can participate on the board. And so if Councillor Duncan were to be appointed again, this would be his 8th and final consecutive year. And then after that, he would be obliged to take a break.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and he has asked if he could be remain for this 8th and final year, but we do need someone to come forward as an alternate. Tom says that he does attend these and very irregularly needs an alternate. So is there anyone who would be interested in being his alternate for the library board? Gary, that includes you, if you can hear me, Councillor Bruce. So we could appoint Councillor Bruce. I'm just kidding. Is there anyone who would be willing to be Councillor Duncan's alternate?
Ask, do we know when these meetings take place? That would help my decision.
I do believe they're daytime meetings. I'm not afraid, I'm afraid I don't know exactly when, but I think they're every quarter.
Yeah.
And
there's only four.
They do actually, just so for your information, they do actually subsidize daycare provision during the meetings. That's one of the things that the Act requires of them.
I think I see like fingers going up over there as well. I feel like I would be definitely willing and interested, but if you are as well, I mean, we can flip a coin.
Okay. Okay. So so then the blank is Councillor Capps be appointed for the alternate. And so is there any discussion on the motion? No. Okay. So hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed and carried. Thank you. And I'm going to read out 8.5, and then I'm going to ask Councillor Capps to take over for me. I do read it out first, correct? Yes?
Probably best not to.
Best not to? Okay, so I'm going to recuse myself for 8.5 and ask Councillor Capps to take over for me. The organization that I work for organizes what she's going to be bringing, so excuse me.
So we have item 8.5, Cultural Connections Workshops, the Village Project, the Journey of Our Generation, that Council approves sending all staff hired since January 1st, 2016 and all new council members to the Cultural Connections Workshops organized by Social Planning Cowichan at a cost of approximately $41.33 per person. Could I have someone move, please? Second. Any discussion, or does staff feel like you need to speak about this one at all?
Thank you, Your Worship, or Deputy Worship, or however that goes
I
now.
don't know.
Just hopefully there's a bit of a recap there on how we got to send some staff in previous years to these workshops. It's been a few years since we've sent staff. We do have at the city a respectful workplace policy, and are intended through that in our strategic plan as well to send staff to biennial workplace training. We haven't done that we've been off pace for a couple of years now, and this is some that actually staff over the last year and a bit have actually expressed interest in going to. So this is us just putting that together so that they can attend that. I've participated in one myself, and it's quite an experiential kind of a process and format. It's quite unique, and I really found that it's quite enlightening. About teachings and understanding from a First Nations perspective. So I'd strongly suggest it. It's a very worthwhile. It's extremely cost effective as well for the number of people we'd be sending this training to. So if you have any questions at all, feel free.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you.
Okay, and 8.6, the 2018 Strategic Plan Actions and Indicators Update, that Council received the 2018 Strategic Plans Action and Indicators Update as attached to the November 19th, 2018 report of the CAO for information only. Does anyone want to move in second? Okay, is there any discussion? No? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And carried. New business, 9.1, proclamation request, BC Aware Days 2019, Be Secure, Be Aware Days, that council proclaim January 28th to February 5th, 2019, BC Aware Days, Be Secure, Be Aware Days. Do I have a mover? Seconder? Questions? So, BC Aware Days. Just going to move here so that I can refresh myself. So be safe, be aware. It's where cybercrime threatens the privacy and security of all citizens and organizations in British Columbia. Cyber criminal activities amounts to a tremendous erosion of economic wealth. Privacy and security issues represent from the massive amounts of personally identifiable information processed each day. It's on page 99 of the agenda. Awareness of the risks to society must be highlighted to engage citizens and organizations to galvanize privacy and security professionals around this cause. The ISACA Vancouver, a member of ISACA, the leading international association of information security governance professionals, wishes to instill privacy and security awareness amongst all citizens and organizations in British Columbia. Whereas the City of Duncan supports the promotion of privacy and security awareness amongst its citizens and organizations so they can protect themselves from privacy infringements, fraud, and other financial crimes. So that's what it's a proclamation. I don't know, actually. It doesn't say on here. Do you know? So we get proclamations quite often from different organizations. Do you have it, Ms. McWilliam, on where this one? I'm just looking. I don't know if my email is okay.
It is a province-wide campaign, or at least this organization is hoping that it will be. And they have submitted these proclamation requests, I would imagine, to every municipality in the province.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And now, this is probably not familiar to anyone else here, but normally we do reports of mayor and council, and so it's reports on what meetings you've been at, things that you would like to share. So is there anyone here who would like to do a report today for your first council meeting? Councillor Brooks, no? 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 Okay. So I'll do a very brief one. It's been a little busy the last couple of weeks since we've settled into this, and so I just want to welcome everyone to our first meeting. First of all, it's great to be around the table here, and I look forward to when the other councillors are back from holidays, work, conferences, and feeling better to all be in attendance. And there's been a lot that has been happening in the community. One thing that happened, another first for the city, was to raise the Métis flag on Louis Riel. It wasn't Louis Riel Day, but it was the day that Louis Riel was hung, and so we did that to honor with the Métis Society to recognize that, and that was a first, and they'd like to continue that every year at the city. And so seems like there's been a number of things taking place in the city. Today I was at the museum, and they have an incredible display on that I encourage everyone to see about. It was created by UVic, and it's about the history of Japanese internment and also the Indian Act and residential schools. And there's quite a few people in the region who took part in that. And also of Paldi, they were heavily involved in that with racism and discrimination that was faced in the valley, and all the people. It's really focused around all the people who fought for rights, and so it just started today. So I would encourage everyone to go through that. There was a good turnout today for the opening, and also see the picture, the portrait of Simon Charlie that's recently been purchased through a fundraiser as well that sits in the museum now. And Simon Charlie is the pole that's out in the welcoming figure that's outside in our council chambers. So that has been obtained by the museum through a fundraiser. So many more things to be said, but I think that's all for the first check-in. It's just really good to be here with all of you, so thank you. And next is our question period. Is there any questions? Yes, if you could come up to the mic and state your name and question.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Alan Lingwood. I'm the Chief Compliance Officer with the Original Farm. We are a cannabis retail business that would be interested in working in your community. Paige and I have been in touch. I hope I haven't been too diligent in hounding her, but we're ambitious, and it's nice to hear what's happened this evening. My question is, the motion this evening, at this stage, does city staff have any freedom to amend the RFP application process, or would it be safe to assume the RFP proposed accurately defines Duncan's process forward?
So I'll defer to staff to answer that.
Through your worship, the application is, the RFP is a draft. The motion of council is that it's substantially in the form, so if there's some minor amendments to be made, then the staff might do that before issuing it, but the intention would be that we would issue it as if basically as you see it now. I don't know the exact date we intend to issue it. It should be well in advance of the January 1st opening for the applications.
So a question I would have is if there is anyone that any information that comes forward at this time, because this is now a public document.
Absolutely.
That people can send in their.
Yeah, if there was an amendment, it was a substantial one, then staff would and staff thought that it was worthwhile amendment, then we would certainly come back to council and suggest that change before we issue it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Anyone else? Oh, Ms. McWilliam, yes.
I realize now that Councillor Bruce was no longer on the phone call for that vote, that unfortunately we lost quorum actually when you left the meeting. So if we could, he's agreed to call in again.
Okay.
If it would be all right with you, if we could redo that question.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that's one thing I guess we need to check if we're on digital calls, is that the call has not been dropped. Okay, I will exit the room again. Hello, Gary. I'm going to put you on speakerphone, okay? And hopefully you can hear all of the proceedings.
Okay, so item 8.5, Cultural Connections Workshops. The Village Project, The Journey of Our Generation. That council approved sending all staff hired since January 1st, 2016 and all new council members to the Cultural Connections Workshops organized by Social Planning Cowichan at a cost of approximately $41.33 per person. Can I just check, Gary, did you catch that?
Yes, she just read what was on the sheet here.
That's right, yeah, that's the recommendation.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. So, could I have a mover? Seconder? Awesome. Any discussion or questions? Do we need to re-discuss for Gary?
Gary, I did do, when you weren't on the phone, a brief recap of how we had gone through sending staff in the past. Would you like me to walk through that again, or was the report sufficient?
I couldn't just hear that. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, Gary. I did do a recap of some of the report where I explained how we had sent staff in the past, and I myself have attended and found it quite worthwhile. But did you want me to go over that again, or did you find the report was fine?
Yeah, I don't want you to do that again, no.
Okay.
Okay, fantastic. Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor? Awesome. Motion carried. Thank you.
And Gary, how was that for you?
I would vote against such.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, that'll be recorded as opposed, okay?
Yes, thank you very much.
Great. All right. Have a good night.
Okay, thanks. Sorry I can't be there, you guys.
Rest up and get well soon.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
May I ask a question? Would we not need him for 8.6 and 9.1 as well? No?
We only don't have quorum right at the moment because
Oh.
Mayor Staples has left. so
Sorry.
we'll be-
Thank you.
we'll be back.
Okay, so I motion to move into closed session, that the meeting be closed to the public under the following sections of the Community Charter. Section 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for position as an officer, employee or agent to the municipality or other position appointed by the municipality. Section 91C, labor relations or other employee relations, and Section 91K, negotiations and related discussions respecting to the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at their preliminary stages and that, in the view of the council, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if it were held in public. So a motion to go into closed. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And we'll take 5 minutes to have everyone leave the room.